Hello and welcome to the Captain's Table, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Berserker01 Batman Shelley, your humble host and space bartender at the Astropub, your professor on the Astro Historian, and your moderator here at the Captain's Table Podcast. Captain's Table Podcast is a Star Citizen podcast where I bring people from all over the Star Citizen community to talk about the game, lore, news, and more. And as always, we do this in both video and audio formats. Starting today, the audio format will be published as soon as I can, right after the release of this. As soon as I'm done with this, well, probably not as soon as I'll probably release it the day after, but super early in the morning. So if you want to listen to this, go to our Spotify or go to anywhere podcasts are posted. Look for the Captain's Table Podcast, and you can grab that early, and then it'll be released on YouTube on Monday, and then the Q&A sessions, the After Dark sessions, released on Wednesday. But if you want to watch us live, we do this at twitch.tv/theastropub, youtube.com/theastropub, or youtube.com/the Captain's Table Podcast, at the Captain's Table Podcast, on Saturdays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. We'd love to have you join chat here as we talk about the various subjects of Star Citizen. Today's topic is on player-generated content and player-made content, and why that's important for the long-term success of Star Citizen. And what might that look like? We'll start off with Mr. Radar Ranger. Who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen? And where can they find you?
I am Andy Green. I like to call myself a self-professed Star Citizen Uber nerd. I've been a backer since 2012. Obviously been playing since then. One of the connections here that I should kind of highlight is that I own a company called My Radar that's basically a weather app company. We make a mobile app that lets you look at the weather. But back in 2017, we did this cool collaboration with CIG where you could look at the moons of Stanton in our app. So you could basically browse through them offline. That was really cool. It was a lot of fun.
So I will ask this for you. Have you experienced A, the rain, and B, the snow yet?
Yeah, I have. So the rain, really cool. The snow, not yet. I saw some videos of it. The rain looks really good. I'm very impressed with it. Clearly, the engine team at CIG is really top notch, and they've really been putting a lot of effort into it. And I think it kind of shows in what we all get to play with. So yeah, I think it's very neat. I would love to be able to rekindle that thing someday where we could have the Star Citizen planets in the app and show the weather. But I think the reason why we kind of stopped it back in the day was the technology just kept changing under the hood. And they were really kind of busy and focused on trying to make the game, understandably. And it would have really kind of required too much involvement from us to keep maintaining our software to work with their tool set, just because of the underlying infrastructure changes. So it didn't really make sense. It was a cool experiment. It was really neat. I really enjoyed it. It was great to geek out. You can actually see my talk about it on the 2017 CitizenCon. I gave a talk there for a little while and kind of blabbed about it. So it was really neat. But either way, yeah, that was really fun, and I would love to someday maybe do that again if the opportunity arises.
And that app is My Radar, right? And it's available on basically any platform?
Yes, sir. So My Radar is iOS, Android, Windows, Alexa, Apple Watch, CarPlay, Android Auto, a few other places.
Can I put it on my smart fridge?
If it runs Android, yes.
Yes.
Cool.
And Mr. Nightcob, who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen? Where can they find you?
All right, so I'm Nightcob, and what do I do in Star Citizen? Where they can find me? You can find me in the contested zones. Right? When you guys lose gear, when you lose to another player in the contested zones, I want you to believe that it's me.
Yeah.
All the time.
Wait, right? Is your in-game name the same?
Yeah.
All right, got it. I'll be on the
lookout. Hopefully one day with FPS radar and scanning, you guys can confirm that at some point in time. But I guess in the short term, probably won't be able to.
That's definitely going to be...
Just assume, though.
That's going to be
just
something...
Assume it's me.
That'll definitely be something we'll get soon. And so that's the reason why I always like having Nightcob with me when I do CZs, because that way he's not shooting at me. You do also show up every so often on Tree's Armchair Admirals and Generals, right?
Yeah, if I can get Tree to like, re-engage on
Yeah.
Armchair. He's busy with life.
He's got two kids,
Yeah,
twins.
something excuse about twins or some bullshit like that. I don't know. Acting like real life matters, not this silly little space game. I don't know. But I'll try and get him back on doing the thing at some point in time. But you can also find, I'll make appearances too on Atira Kells, soldiers, not his soldiers opinion videos, but he does a lot of like game recorded streams and stuff like that. And usually that's with him if it's anything like Space Marine 2 or Star Citizen. One day I'm going to beg him and get him into DCS. I desired him to be the Apache co-pilot gunner, and he can destroy the things he used to drive, i.e. tanks.
But yeah, you also can find him. Sometimes you'll find Night Cobb with me and my organization, which is
Whoa. I didn't authorize you to sell that I associate with you outside of this.
Well, you also associate with ammo, which is also associated with lore. So that's where that comes from.
That's true. It's true. All right. I can't hide the affiliations.
I will, because I've been, lore people have been saying, why don't you talk about it enough? I do have an organization, for those you don't know, called the League of Relic Enthusiasts, or Lore, and we meet on frequently, but I do streams on Sundays on my gaming channel with them. So if you want to join that or you want to go watch that, it's always a good way of checking it. All right. Let's see. What's the next one? Oh, yeah. Let's get into the actual discussion for today. So let's start off with what is player generated content in your opinion, so that we can get a good baseline for what it is, each of us kind of our definitions of it, so that people who are watching or listening can get the idea of what direction we're coming at before we start talking about why it's important or not. Nikon, what do you think? What is player generated content to you?
To me, it is the emergent sandbox related gameplay where the sand is in the box. We have the tools that we need to build our own, metaphorical like castles, moats, and there's also the valuable items in the sandbox that we want to fight over and that we want to, I say fight, have conflict over. It doesn't necessarily have to be fighting. It could be just compete over. Um, and the tools that facilitate that, as opposed to scripted events, missions, or whatever that necessarily like push you down a path. We create that path. We create that environment. And we create that competition. That's what player generated content. I hate to say it too. I also would argue that it's heavily based on some kind of economy within. Maybe not like full on economy, but something that has to
I think you could
basically
say
create value.
broadly game mechanics.
Yeah,
Because
broad
it
game mechanics
requires
of
the
economy.
mechanics there so you can actually have that content.
So Nikon, I will say you're fading out a little bit on the end when you kind of go down, so it may just be a mic placement thing. So
I will work to adjust.
all right. And Radar, Andy, your same question with you. What is player generated content to you? What does that mean?
Yeah, so I kind of agree with pretty much everything he said, but I think there's a good way to kind of show a contrast between player generated content and non-player generated content. So like when you anytime a person joins a new game, they're not really familiar with how it works. They don't know anybody in the game yet. They're not familiar with player organizations. They're just kind of learning the ropes. It's very typical to have like missions, whether it's like a starting tutorial or something a little bit more elaborate, where you basically engage with an NPC to carry out some tasks and get some rewards and earn some money. And sometimes those missions get pretty elaborate. Sometimes they're really simple. You're just delivering a box, for example, or sometimes they get really complex to the point where you have to go and solve puzzles and, do an investigation or something a little bit more like and combat missions, that kind of thing. The issue with that is that the studio, whoever makes the game, has to create those in advance and have a good number of them so that the player doesn't necessarily get bored. You kind of have to have them, really, because you've got to have, you've got this open sandbox universe. You've got to have something to do in it. That's what those missions are for. Player generated content is something that hopefully takes off organically, in the sense that when you have really good game mechanics that vibe with each other and build with synergies off of each other, it creates the open environment where players create the content in the game. So rather than having a fixed mission or a scripted mission, like Nightcop said, you're trying to get by in the universe and either interacting with or experiencing a conflict with the other players. So, for example, I'm a solo miner. I love to mine, but I want to be able to make some money so I can buy a better ship, and I might sell my mined minerals to somebody. That's a simple example of player generated content. But more elaborate content can be, okay, here's a spot on a planet where we've seen there's a great, an awesome amount of really rare resources, and me and my org, we're going to go in and take over that spot. But there's another org that realizes this and they see it and they want to take it from us. So they get into a conflict with us. There's FPS fighting that comes out of that, ship fighting. If it's a long drawn out conflict, we wind up having to build up supply chains and, get support for all of it. So there's really, when you start to look at it that way and you start to look how you can incorporate the game mechanics to have players interact with each other, it can get really elaborate and really drawn out. And if the mechanics are done well, if the tools are there, the players can really generate their own content on their own, and it becomes, organic and something that lives for a while and keeps going and builds on itself. And it kind of takes some of the load off of the studio because the players basically do all the work, and it becomes a little bit more unique and outside of the scripted genre where it's not so fixed. You get something that's unexpected and unknown. So that would be player generated content, in my opinion.
I'm going to echo everything y'all say. The only thing I'll add on to that is it's also when CIG, like, to give another example, but it's sort of like a kind of what Nightcop said. It's the tools. You have a sandbox and you have the tools to actually work on it, because Star Citizen is a sandbox. The tools to be able to build our own sandcastles to do what we want. That's necessarily base building, but I will add on to it is that the player generated content is an incentive outside of specific gameplay design, to do something in the game. So, for instance, Star Wars Galaxies famously had entire professions in crafting, which they were connected to the game, but they weren't specifically like, oh, you want to get X material, like X outfit. Well, you're gonna have to go craft it yourself. It was like, hey, these people can craft it, and there is the ability for them to craft better and better stuff. But it wasn't the only way to accomplish this goal. But they also had other things that were like you could become a bard in Star Wars Galaxies. Did it give you any bonuses? No, it was just you could have a cantina band for fun. Giving those sorts of options and tools which aren't specifically directed only at gameplay, but are directed at players to sort of do what they want, to sort of expand beyond just the strict gameplay content. So the more you do that, the more that expands out the possibilities of what the game can be and do for other people. And often, and in my experience with other games, when you do those sorts of things, those things can inspire other additions to the game that the developers didn't really think about themselves. That's generally, it's just basically the tools used to create content that isn't specifically designed by CIG.
There's something I could add to that. It also gives the players a chance to craft a narrative in the universe that's outside the scope of CIG or the studio crafting a narrative. So like Onyx, for example, and some of the other, the last Valakar mission from the last patch, those were specific stories that CIG crafted for us to kind of play. But like if there's, if you can imagine like a big multi-org competition over, a certain part of space or a certain part of a planet that's got a lot of resources on it, the studio can actually take advantage of that and make that become part of the lore, and write a story based off of that.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel part of the story.
Yeah.
Because you are.
A great example, a game that I played a lot of was, I can't remember this one because it was sort of their second iteration, but their first iteration was more of a medieval theme. But the second iteration they did was called Heat, which is a game that's been abandoned now. But one of the major features of Heat was it was a survival game, but it was like a Western style survival game. So people could go out and build bases and all these sorts of things. But if you reached a certain location, you sat down in if you reached the where the White House was, and you got into the White House and sat down in the Oval Office, you could be elected. You could become the president, and the president got to collect taxes from everyone's stuff. So if you built anything, you would get certain like kickbacks from that. In Heat, it was like if you went to go sell materials, so you could get cash, so you could then go to the NPC stores. The president would get specific amount of money from that, so that they could get those taxes and they could use it for whatever they wanted to, and then they could set tax rates. Did that actually affect the game overall? No, but it did make other people mad if you just jack the tax rates up, and it would cause players to go, well, we're going to go overthrow the president right now, and so they would march and go and kill the president and then put their own person in charge. The original one was like a medieval style thing where you had money, but you also had like resources. So every time you gather like wood, a portion of that wood would go to the king, so the king could do what they want to. Those sorts of ideas are, in my opinion, great sort of. That does it actually have a gameplay purpose? No, but it does drive players to do actions because they're like, man, I hate this. So like I'm not saying CIG should do this, but having like planetary governments that you can establish, which have arbitrary taxes, in some of the rural areas that would force players to get in
How dare
conflict.
you bring up money sinks, Paul?
Yeah.
Don't you know? Like that idea has been banished long time ago.
No more money
There's only
sinks.
positive income. There's no negative. Okay. Every once in a while, you got to pay for fuel. That's about it.
So we've talked a little bit about like what it is. Now we sort of hit it on this a little bit, but we'll kind of go more in depth of this. Why
Yeah.
should CIG or why shouldn't CIG lean into player generated content? Andy, I'll start with you. You sort of hit on this a little bit, but like,
Yeah.
what's the advantage compared to CIG's own, generated content? What would players get out of this beyond just tools?
Well, so there's rationale for both the studio and for the player. So what CIG gets out of it is they don't necessarily have to write missions. Um, we all kind of have fun playing them. They did a really good job, it looks like, with the Onyx missions in the new patch that's coming out. But that can be time consuming and a little bit of a challenge to kind of keep up with if the resources aren't always there. What players get out of it is, and like you said, I touched on it before, the idea of being able to play the game and engage with it in a way that's unexpected and real and, visceral, where they're not playing against an NPC that might be easily defeated or a scripted story that they've already repeated a million times, and they're just going back for a second round of loot. They get to participate in an unknown conflict with other real humans that is exhilarating and fun. They don't know what the outcome's going to be. They could lose, they could win big. There's it's just a really cool way to engage with a game, because I think we've all probably we're all talking about an MMO here, so we've all probably engaged with other players at one time or another. It is really fun when you get that chance to unexpectedly come up against another human player and see who wins. And yeah, it can suck if you lose, but no, that's part of the point of playing and learning and getting better and playing with friends and coming back for revenge and all that kind of good stuff. So
Immersion storytelling. Everyone
Yeah.
loves immersion storytelling for that sort of thing. So yeah. Nycob, same question for you. What is it? Is there an advantage? Like, why should or shouldn't CIG do this sort of like player generated content? Pitch it to the person who might be a little like skeptical of this idea.
Ooh. My best stories in Star Citizen, for the most part, have nothing to do with the scripted content of like doing a mission, even some of the events. God, my first moment with Star Citizen, and these are just again, they're tools, they're features that were in the game that facilitated a moment for me. Um, I guess one of them's kind of one of their missions, but I would argue this is actually one of the sandbox tools. So one of the first things I did when I started playing, my first ship that I bought in game was a Saber, and I took a bounty for a player. And I was like, this is it. We're gonna branch out. We're gonna try our first space combat against player. Sure enough, kind of like Kismet figured out that they were at one of the satellites around, I think it was Daymar, around Daymar, and they were trying to hack the satellite so that they could proceed to do whatever nefarious stuff players do when they've got a crime stat 3 is. So I showed up at that Comstat because I happened to see the contract pop for it, and I had their god marker in that vicinity. So I showed up there, and they were out of their ship. Their ship is stationed right outside the comm array, and I'm waiting for them. I don't know any better about other things like getting out in FPS at this point in time, but I'm like got a missile locked and I'm ready to go, and I'm waiting for them to get back in their ship to turn red so I can launch on it, not have to worry about a crime stat. And they get in it and they actually flare off my missiles. And the next thing you know, I'm chasing them and they're burning down towards Daymar and their Gladius. I'm in my saber. This is back in the old days before master modes, so they could do like 1,000 meters per second. And then, we're in the atmosphere and we're cruising through the hills of Daymar. This is all just emergent content. And I am like, that was one of my first Star Citizen experience where I was like, "Ooh, we're in it." And then it's a dogfight in the mountains of Daymar. They won, by the way, but it still goes down as like one of my favorite all time experiences in Star Citizen. That was the moment where I was like, "Ooh, this game might have something here." And then you know, for me, it's like you focus on the tools that breed that kind of content. So, like putting effective player bounties, like the player bounty system is, don't get me wrong, I had that experience, but it's largely broken in a lot of ways. If player bounties were more of a thing, like like lawfully generate a contract when you were wronged and adjust the value of that contract and it's your money, your collateral on the thing, like it's a reason to earn more money to hire people to get revenge on a player if you're not skilled, refueling contracts, medical beacons. These are the things that would have, in my opinion, generated better emergent like player content, player created content in FC. Because I'm betting everybody back in the heyday of medical beacons and stuff like that, when bunker running was a big deal and medical beacons had first come out, like I bet everybody's got at least one bunker story of somebody, whether it's med runners or whoever coming to show up, maybe getting involved in the fight with them, maybe saving them, maybe turning on them, and that's all probably a better story than, the 16 bounties that I did in the, you know, asteroid field of Yella at one point in time just to grind out some money to buy a component. That happened, but it's not nearly the story. It's not the engagement that I want with the game.
I'm going to make the pitch because I know I've seen a lot of people in chat already be like, well, PvP is, I don't like the idea of PvP. It doesn't have to be PvP.
Nope.
A great example of this is what CIG is trying to do with base building or crafting. One of the things I want to do, which sounds stupid, is I want to be able to craft the best booze in the universe. Why does that matter? Well, somebody may want it for whatever reason, and who knows what CIG could do with adding buffs or bonuses to drinking that alcohol that might improve your gameplay in some way, shape, or form. Or having it, meaning like say with NPC content, if you're doing like maybe you're doing touring, right? Where you're taking on rich passengers and showing them around the verse, having that booze available will boost their happiness as they're doing it because it's like, wow, this is a really fine liqueur or whiskey or something like that. And that has nothing to do with combat because you won't be able to purchase that except for with other players. So you'll come to me, buy that for your 890 jump so you can go back to your, or even like a what is it, a E1, for your basic intro stuff. But that's just my example. It could be you've got someone like Moist Noodle or someone like Night Cobb who wants to dogfight. Night Cobb isn't going to spend the hours and hours and hours it takes to find the resources, research the advancements into the say shield generation, and then craft out a tier 4 shield generator just for his own fighter. But if Night Cobb knows that I build tier 4 shield generators, he'll be like, I will go to Paul and buy a tier 4 generator off of him or do something in return for it. So
And have some of that delicious booze you've been making because that'll just be a cool little side note
yeah,
in the adventure of going and buying that tier 4 shield generator.
you
You
get
know,
you,
Paul,
I'm down.
you get a free
I'll,
bottle of Paul's champagne with every purchase.
Yeah.
I wanted to elaborate on that because you and I were fortunate enough to play Star Wars Galaxies.
Yes.
And what was really cool about that game, especially with their crafting, was that it was designed in such a way that there was always somebody who could craft a better widget
Mhm.
because of the way the resources worked. So in other words, if you went through and expended the energy, you could always find, the raw materials that were a higher quality. And if you went out and found all the highest quality materials, you can make the coolest widget. And what was really neat about it is you could then become renowned and notorious for selling that best widget. People would
Yeah.
seek you out and you would become famous. And it did not escape me that during the last Citizen Con, I forget who the dev was, but when they were going through the crafting presentation and describing how it works, and clearly they did take some cues from Star Wars Galaxies. They made that exact same reference that as player generated content that's not PvP, you have an ability now to go out and do the mining and the non-combat mechanics to go out and become the best builder of that widget and have people seek you out. And I think that is just amazing. Like that was a cool experience to see in Star Wars Galaxies. I remember looking for the guy who could build the best gun and who could build the best droid parts or the best droid and all that. And it was a lot of fun. And we clearly are going to have the opportunity to do that, I think, with Star Citizen based on the way they're headed.
Yeah.
I think one of the key parts about that is we need a better player contract system
That too.
similar to like Eve has and stuff like that. Like if they could just give us that major tool that supports I know I spoke of a combat encounter earlier, but God, I would just love the ability to contract out some things sometimes where it's like, hey, I need a gunner.
Yeah.
I just need a gunner for 2 hours. This is the pay. And it helps me accomplish, sometimes it might be to like satisfy my own cap contract that I've taken for lore to like hang around Hathor and stuff like that. Or that's combat, but I should have picked a non-combat. Hold on. You can tell where my brain literally sits at most of the time. But I mean, even just the idea of like I took out a contract for transport. Like, hey, I just want to transport myself or my ship or my equipment like from Hurston to Pyro because I left a bunch of stuff at Hurston and I'm spending all my time in Pyro. And I don't feel like going through the jump gate to get it all. Like I would just love to be able to contract out and just be like, go get that stuff for me and take
I
it
agree
here
with
and I'll
that
pay you.
100%. Being able to create that content for another player by giving somebody else a mission. I mean, that
Yeah.
is, I hope they put that into place. There is some optimism that they might go in that direction because if you look at the presentation they did for party finding, it seemed as though they had an opening where you could, solicit party members to fill a certain role.
Yeah.
And if they go that route, that would be really smart, very prudent.
Yeah. And they also talked about the new contract system they wanted to do where you very specify things. I think the other thing is reputation system, which again is connected to the contract system that the beacon system, the updated beacon system that they wanted to release with how they want to do things. So yeah, just in general, I think the reason why people would want this is that it will engage you in more than just PvP, but also PvE, as well as just player encounters where if you want to be the best, base builder or crafter, you can have those, but you're going to want to engage with the other players because other players are going to want to engage with you for that content. And as long as you're doing that, there'll be people who want to purchase it. As long as there's an economy there, the tools that CIG can create to make those things scarce enough or rare enough that it's important to acquire but not impossible to to save. There's a balance there. Like the problems with, if I'm selling a tier 4 shield generator and Nightcob buys it, if there's no reason for Nightcob to come back and repurchase the tier 4 shield generator because it's just infinitely fixable or infinitely returnable, then he will never do it. So there needs a reason for Nightcob to come back and be like, well, it's broken. I need a new one and to buy a new one. And I'm not and not do that so often that it's like, you know, oh, every time Night Cobb blows up, he needs to get a new shield generator from me. It's like that would be insane. So there's got to be a balance there.
Yeah.
I wonder though, because if you have insurance for your ship parts, I mean, would that be a reasonable thing? That's an interesting point to bring up, though. If I do go out and buy his awesome shield generator, and I have insurance on my ship, and it gets blown up, do I immediately get that same part, or does he get a commission from the insurance?
Now, see, that would be cool. I don't know. That's a weird. I, it's a weird line to draw. Like, part of me would
Yeah,
hope that the insurance money, yes, feeds back into the economy
yeah,
in that regard, and that would be like a partial victory in my book. I like the idea though. I'd be satisfied. I don't know. I feel like I could go either way on this. If it was one of those things where it's like, I know I'm probably going to blow up a few times, like I'm not buying just one shield generator from Paul.
Yeah.
I'm buying like
yeah,
10, you know,
right,
and I'm stockpiling. And I feel like one of their big things with tier recovery, you know, because, you know, rarity of certain gears, like they don't want you to have gear fear to the point where you're like, I'm not putting the tier 4 shield gen
right.
on a ship. I'll just fly with, you know, whatever. But uh I don't know, you know, I feel like it could go back once they bring in like full on Maelstrom, like true ship death, you know, the different or engineering. I guess that's engineering. I don't know. It's so hard to tell
Well,
what's
there's a mechanic that a
blocker
lot
on
of
that.
MMOs have been putting in place called durability,
Mhm.
but I don't know how
Yeah.
it would apply in this case.
They
But
are
like,
adding durability.
yeah, but so here's the thing: durability makes sense if you are using that same part, and I go out down to a planet and I overheat it, and I have to make repairs to it. The
Yeah.
durability kind of goes down a little bit. But like, how do you solve the problem of durability if you blow up and you need a new one?
Yeah.
Durability shouldn't
Yeah.
really be an issue at that point because you're getting a new one. I think it's an interesting balance.
The simplest answer is CIG wants you to blow up less. So
Yeah,
in the future, so you
Yeah.
want, instead of blowing up, you'll just be disabled, and you'll need to get repaired and get towed around. And
yeah,
so
right.
the absolute loss of the item isn't going to be as much of an issue. But the simplest solution to the problem with that in mind is the durability will eventually go down. And if you do
Yeah.
blow up, instead of you getting a replacement for player generated item, you get the value of that item. So they just pay
Yeah,
you in cash
Yep.
with what that
right.
value is. So now you at least
Yep.
get some of that money back, and then you can go back to
Yeah,
me and buy it, but it's not going to hurt as much because yeah, it's gone, but you got 60% of its value. So now
right.
you can come back to me and you only have to earn 40% more to buy a new one. Or maybe I
That makes
go, hey, I'll take that 60% and give you a new one because I know you're going to come back because you blew
yeah,
up that thing blew up, and I mean, it means you're gonna blow up more. I'll take your insurance payout every time
yeah.
to get you a new one, as long as it doesn't require me, cost me more money to do that. So
That makes the case for Night Cobb's approach of buying 10 of them up front.
yeah,
Well, I mean, I'd be fine too if the basic cycle of that again, it goes back to like player contracts is like insurance gives me the money. Let's say I've run out of the 10 of them that I originally bought, and it's like, okay, I need another 4 or 5 or whatever, and I use the insurance payouts to buy another 4 or 5, but I don't feel like necessarily flying back to Paul to pick those up. And I create a contract just by buying them from Paul where it's like, okay, I'll pay an extra X amount to have them delivered to me in the current location that I'm at. And then a player picks that up,
yeah,
you know? And then now that player's got a mission to go pick up these shield gens from Paul and bring them to me at a given location without getting pirated. Because if I scan somebody's courier ship, because that could be done in something like an Aurora or a Titan, you know, for that kind of size component. If it's like a size, size 1 shield gen, like you could fit like probably 20 of them in the back of an Avenger. And it's one of those things like maybe it's not just they're picking up stuff for me, they're picking up stuff, in the area that Paul is selling it and bringing it over to me in Pyro to, and some other players ordered a special radar, or whatever. And, they're doing the legitimate courier missions that I think a lot of us would have really liked, um, you know, to be a thing on our first starter ship when we have that ability.
So
I don't know.
there's something I got to bring up here. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about this. When my company did that little demo with the planets and star system, it was a really cool idea, but it could have absolutely gone a lot farther. What I would love to see is for CIG to release a mobile companion app,
Hmm.
because one of the biggest challenges we all have with playing the game as adults is we have to fight for time in the game. Real world things, jobs, personal issues come up, and it limits our ability to kind of stay in the game a lot. But then there's a segment of the population that can be in the game a lot. They're unemployed, or they're students, or they're on break and they've got plenty of time. If done right, a mobile app could do exactly what you just suggested
Yeah.
and
Not ever
increase
having to log
player
in the game.
engagement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
no, no, no.
fucking down for that too.
You gotta do it in a balanced way, because you don't want to completely remove incentive for players to get into the game. But if you look at it the right way, if it's done right, you maximize the ability to capitalize on people who want to get engaged in the game but can't, and provide content for the people who are in the game and are looking for that content. So, as an example, I'm sitting on the can with my mobile app, and I want to move my shield generator from Paul's shop to my
Why
base.
do you have to be on the can in this example, by the way?
Well, I mean, I'm trying to come up with something where I'm otherwise unable to get into the game.
The
But like,
Sorry,
Metro,
that was him
the
admi-
bus.
that's him admitting
Also,
where he does a lot of his thinking about Star Citizen, by the way, guys.
it's also where
The
I'm on the
throne.
phone the most.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you.
But the point there is, like, you obviously, the trick is finding the balance between keeping people from wanting to get in the game. You don't want to make it so easy that they never get into the game at all. But
Yeah.
you want to find that sweet spot where you're maximizing the time of the people who can't get in by giving them an opportunity to participate, that creates the content and the tasks and the reason to be engaged for those who are online. That would
Totally
be
agree.
a great way to have player generated content with contracts.
And in your example, the irony is like, so me, right, I'm not going to sit in game and just wait on my shield gens to show up before I go out and engage in like some kind of like combat oriented gameplay. I actually, by virtue of sitting on the can in your example, and getting on my app on my phone and saying, "Hey, I'm creating this contract, for somebody to go pick up those shield generators," so that the next time I log in, my type of gameplay is supported. But I actually just encouraged another player to actually engage in the game and
Yeah,
log into the
absolutely.
game and play it in a meaningful way.
Yeah,
Like that's what I agree with you. I would love that. I would
yeah.
absolutely love that.
It just it's got to be limited in some way that's fair, that makes it so that we don't wind up having sweatshops that do nothing but run contracts outside of the game
Yeah.
and never get involved in the game. I mean, to be honest, maybe you could analyze the metrics on that and find out whether or not that's actually a good thing, maybe. But you just being careful to navigate the whole idea without creating too much room for abuse, I think, is the biggest challenge. But
Yeah.
clearly, like you said, being able to have that create gameplay for other people while you're offline, and then for you to be able to engage with the gameplay that you want as soon as you get online because your stuff has already been delivered. That is a huge thing.
Let's break down a little bit more about, because we've talked a little bit about why it's a good thing. We've talked about what it is and why it's a good thing, and we talked about some examples. Are there any examples that you can think of in the short term that CIG could do with either the tools they have now or they're developing? So engineering, Maelstrom, scanning, obviously crafting and base building are the big ones. Are there anything examples of what CIG could do in, say, a year from now that might that might move the needle towards this sort of player generated content? Nightcom, we'll start with that one.
Ooh, I've got a list. All right. I'll do better than a year from now, by the way. I'll do in the next 3 to 4 months.
Ooh.
Because I think they've made some poor decisions and they've left some gameplay that they even had already behind and or that they could reiterate on, I feel like in a relatively short term. Like one, you can upgrade the player bounty and turn medical beacons back on. Um but we've got to figure out where the tier 0 item recovery fits into that game. Because it just nuked med beacon gameplay into the ground. Nobody waits on med beacons anymore. But if they could at least centralize it and stuff like that, maybe, so that it's no longer like, hey, I get a med beacon for somebody in Pyro while I'm in Stanton, and then some player accepts it. That doesn't work. They need to just build some scripting around that. I don't know how heavy of a lift that is, but I'm assuming if they put some focus toward it, it might be actually something they could upgrade it to. Two, this is an easier one. turn back on the components and weapons in Wicklow. Like, I don't know why these got turned off and it just became all about ships and icties and stuff like that. But the components you can't get from Wicklow right now. Like,
Oh,
you can't turn in. Yeah. So, and again, they need to change Wicklow fundamentally from a, event loot driven economy crafter, whatever they want to use it as, is like an interim, and make it like normal commodities slash minables slash, things that you can buy and stuff like that, recipes with, maybe the more rare components and stuff like that require like one or two specific, like, special event driven things. They've gone overboard with that. With it's like, I need 6 pure Karenite and I need 6 great triple grade A Valakar pearls and 6 rare Tavaran war metals. Like, how about we go back to like an idea of like, I need this much corundum, I need this much steel, I need this
I
much.
think they want to save
Um,
that experience for actual crafting, though. That's my
I
guess.
you could do it
do you
now.
ever wonder what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's like, why not start testing? If you've got the guy and you want to start testing the idea of how we start responding to that kind of content, like, why don't we just do that now?
It's
I
it's
don't
funny.
get it.
I was actually thinking about this myself, and it's possible. I could just be, reading too much into it. But they could actually absolutely right now be using the metrics from the gathering and collection and delivery process here, to see how many people engage with it, how long it takes, how much is too much. Is it too easy to gather these resources? Should they make it harder? They can
Yeah.
absolutely be testing that stuff now, and that might be giving them some guidance to figure out how to do the crafting when we actually get around to it. It's just a thought. It would make sense, because I agree with you. It is kind of, we're not gathering raw materials. We're gathering stuff that's difficult to get, and maybe they're using that to help identify how they should structure the crafting stuff. It would be smart to do it that way.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I saw a comment there that's like, he's not a crafter, he's a trader. I get that, but we're missing out on opportunities on how to inform like a system that they're planning to build. Like, we could use him as a placeholder to better deliver player generated content. And if you give us contracts for that stuff, like, if I was like, I really want my F8C Lightning and I want the Wicklow one. So, but it requires mining a bunch of like materials, that I'm not a miner. I'm going to pay Radar Ranger to go mine for me.
Yeah.
Let me generate a contract then that allows Radar Ranger to satisfy my needs so that I can then spend it on my Wicklow project for the F8C Lightning. It feels like we're missing those connective tissue pieces for that player generated content where the now Radar Ranger is doing mining for me, and he has whatever adventures while mining that stuff and fulfilling that contract.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's like, those are some of the big ones. Hold on, I got a list. I wrote it down. Let me just make sure I caught it all.
Let me get out my
Yeah.
list.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I know this is combat oriented, but I really feel like they need to spend some time fixing bounty hunting beacons. I'm not saying incorporating bounty hunting V2 gameplay. Let's fix the beacons. And let's make this variable and let's make it make sense. Um, so that players can once again, I think it should be players should be allowed to choose when they get to issue a bounty. So if you get killed, it's not the crime stat system. It's the, okay, somebody killed me in a lawful area with a comm array. I have the ability to put a bounty on them.
Yeah.
And you can set us limits. You
How do
don't
you how
have
do
to
you
make it
prevent
like,
that from being like used as a tool to gang up on people?
Well, because you have to.
I,
The idea is that it's a response. Because like right now, you can
Okay,
press
okay,
chart. You can press charges
fair
if
enough.
someone attacks
Right.
you.
exactly,
So
Right.
if you
exactly. And
just take the same idea, but instead of pressing charges, you say, "Would you like to set a bounty?" and you hit
Right.
yes.
Okay.
You can type in a number, and then it'll automatically generate a bounty for that person.
yeah,
You know.
I
and you
buy
can set
that.
a variable limit on that too. So it's like, all it is a window. It's like, and it could be a slider for all it matters. It's kind of similar to like MechWarrior, Plum plays MechWarrior Mercenaries.
Mhm.
Where you like choose like the
Um,
credits you want for the job versus the salvage, and you just slide the scale.
Yeah.
It'd just be like one of those things. Like, okay, it's between 50 and 200,000 AUEC. What do you want to set it to? And then
Yeah,
You know,
it's like saying, do you want to do you want to bring this up with the police, or do you want to handle it personally? Kind
hmm hmm
kind of situation. It's the Wild West sort of like, do you want to let the law handle it, or do you want to handle it yourself? And Wild West is a huge inspiration for the game universe itself. So why not? Why not have like be petty and be like, I want that man dead. I want his children
yeah,
dead. I
Oh, I
want
would use it a
everything.
lot.
You know?
yeah, yeah. But I mean, like, then there's incentive too, and it's one of those things. Like, what I want though is I want that if you do like the non-default and you say I want that bounty is 300 freaking k.
Hmm.
300,000 AUEC to he ruined my experience in that mode. He or she ruined that experience, and while I was doing something that I didn't want PvP during, but I've got the money and I'm about to feed it into the economy so that it's no longer just like the default bounty, which just comes out of the ether.
Yeah.
Like I want it to be the player generated content, i.e., like the skin in the game to generate that content more than anything.
And that would also mean that, no, even if that person was able to get in a typical bounty, they would be able to go get their bounty removed, or their crime stat removed. This way, it
Yeah,
would be like this person's got an arrow on their head, and wherever they go, consistently now until the end of
yeah,
time, or until they're killed and that bounty is claimed. So that way, you
When
couldn't
you
just
guys
log out and avoid it, sort of thing.
when you guys put it that way, it actually makes it a little bit easier to combat abuse.
Yeah.
Like if
yeah.
somebody's, really antagonizing one person, if there's a big enough bounty on them and the whole server decides to gang up on them, that's one way to shut them up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of
Or
people who want PvP content who will do PvP content because they want to use player bounties. There's entire content creators I know who just do player bounties because it's fun. And if I was like, if I'm attacked by someone and I say, hey, Nightcob, this guy's been attacking me constantly. I have this option to throw a 500k bounty on him. Then
I'm there.
Nightcob is just like, I can kill somebody and get 500k out of this. Let's do it.
Sold.
Yeah. Uh,
You had me at hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you could also do this this would also be great because it would allow for non-legal bounties as well. So if you're in Pyro and someone's messing with you, you have an option to be like, you have
Yeah.
the information from this person. Would you like to push this person so this person can't hide? They can't just go to Pyro and do that sort of thing until at least we get reputation stuff. It's a taking the system that already exists and adding a layer to it that
Yep.
doesn't. That's not something easy, I would say, but it's definitely something that is that would improve the experience. So,
Yeah.
um,
I got done with my list though.
okay, radar,
Yeah.
Andy. What are some things that CIG could add that would improve this? Again, we've talked a little bit about this already, but like some specifics that people could do.
So in the spirit of the way Nightcob handled it, I've got two, a short term and a long term thing as well. So
Okay.
short term, to me, honestly, one of the best things CIG could do is follow through and finish the social tools that they described and demoed at CitizenCon. Because right now, people are too anonymous. And let me also add to that, they also have to kind of improve scanning. So I'm not 100% sure where they're going with this new scanning mechanism yet. Like, I get it. There's this mysticism about going up against somebody and you're not really sure who they are. You have to go through the effort to scan them to find who they are. But like one of the things that's really big in Eve, for example, is the kill list. If you know who you're going up against, you know who killed you, and you can immediately figure out what to do from there if you want to go after them or put up a bounty or whatever. With the social tools, if they get that in place where you can actually start to see ship names or player names on the screen, you can see right off the bat, okay, this is an org that we have declared war against, or this is a guy who killed me last week and I got a note against him that that made me add him to my kill list. Those kind of tools right off the bat would absolutely step up the player engagement level, because you have a reason. There's a quick answer as to whether or not you want to get into a conflict with somebody. Longer term, I think being able to be on track with base building and the concept of territory I think would help with player engagement. So the way Eve handles it, and I'm just going back to that because that's that game, they get a lot of publicity in the media, in the game media, for the legendary battles that go on in that game. What's unique about Eve is that the organizations and alliances can go in and take over like an entire star system and kind of claim it. And that right off the bat creates this conflict over territory. You know, Eve is very good about showing the galactic maps where they say this alliance owns this portion, this alliance owns that portion. Having a reason to kind of own territory and dispute it, you know, for whatever reason, whether it's because of the minerals there or the strategic location. I think having something like that is going to be kind of important for long-term player engagement, player conflict. The conflicts themselves drive a shit ton, a ton
You can.
of
Over 10 minutes, you're fine.
Okay, all right.
The YouTube bot got bored about three when we started talking about DCS, and we're just like, oh, there's nothing foul here. We'll move on. You know.
Okay. That conflict creates all of these secondary game mechanics because you have to be resupplied, you have to rebuild ships, you have to repair them, you have to get rearmed, refueled, all of the stuff that comes underneath that. But with having territory and things like that, I'm kind of interested to see where they're going to go with the station warfare. What's interesting about that is it seems like you can claim territory in the sense that you're going to go take over the station that's going to protect you and give you the infinite shields. I think that's interesting because you're creating that conflict and it's restricted to one area. It seems like it's going to be restricted to Pyro. The thing that makes me a little bit curious is how do you... Like they're going to need to have alliances in place when that takes effect, because otherwise it will only be like Pest who takes over that entire area, and the rest of us are left, hopelessly unprotected because we can't even muster the numbers to compete against them. So having some kind of ownership stake and a competition for that, I think, will be a big thing. The base building will be part of it, really. Because that is going to represent a territory that organizations will own. They will potentially house valuable items there or resources that other people might want to try to take to make it easier for them. So, that's the right path. But I'm kind of curious to see what else they can add to it.
I'd like hop onto that idea. I think, and before anyone, because I know a lot of people go, well, how would you do that naturally? And the answer is you can hand wave like a beacon, where you put down a beacon to claim an area, and that beacon, it comes equipped with some sort of disruption technology where drones are unable to function in that without a certain code, so thus no one can build on your location within a certain radius, and then you can expand that radius by building more beacons and slowly expanding that out, so that way you have control over that. And if people trespass, you'll get like notification that there's somebody in your area.
That's a good point, because one of the things that I'm fond of saying, and I want to make sure I can articulate this in a way that makes my point understood, because sometimes I don't say it in a good way. CIG has gone through an enormous effort to build this huge universe, and now they have to find some way to make it smaller. And what I mean by that is they have to find a way to bring all of these people who are spread out in this universe. How do you get them together so that you can actually have that conflict, so that we're not wandering around on our own in a huge universe? I would like to see where they go with scanning in the future, because here's on what you were just thinking about, and what you just talked about is a kind of cool idea. If an org put out a satellite somewhere in space, maybe it's a beacon, like even in Eve, they let you put up a banner, like a hologram of the org that owns the station. Put out a satellite that has maybe your hologram for your Orgon or your alliance, and it is capable of detecting any ship within a certain radius. If any ship comes within that area, someone in the org who put this satellite up would become aware of it, and then they can opt to go out and chase them away or get into a conflict or whatever. That would be, an in-world equivalent of like the beacon that you just talked about.
Yeah. So there are ways you can do sort of things like where you can mark it as a territory, as a way that people will know it's a territory, but then there's a reason to fight over it. Like, you might get a notification that is an illegal mining area, and now you have to go deal with the person who's illegally mining on your territory. And we've already seen CIG wants to do permissions, so you could easily also give permissions to people who are in your org or an alliance, or just people who say, hey, can I set up near your base? And you're like, that's fine, and create a little town. So then you have like an authorized personnel list of who can go in there. So, um, I mean, I've already kind of mentioned one of those, which is just sort of like having crafting will allow for people to make things. But in the short term, having a location which is rich with materials you need for specific subjects, which we already kind of have with Hathor, but not requiring a complicated ass, long term, 15 different like levers to pull. But like, hey, this location is guaranteed to spawn this item, and you need this item for Wicklow. Um, so like a Hathor, like one of the security bases in Hathor, right now we have those sort of like those blades, but maybe some specific ace helmets are located there or something like that. To have what CIG's already built have guaranteed locations where you can find rare items or specific items that are necessary for Wicklow.
Yeah.
That would drive people to those locations more frequently, which would have player, emerging player content.
And they were so close, man.
Yeah.
Like they just overdid it.
Yeah.
Like when not only that, but they picked bad things. Like they did at least come off the it was like ridiculous numbers too. Like you needed like 15 of like the number 7 comp board from that you can only get at the end of like a obituary and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's like how do you, if you don't want to engage in that style of gameplay, that's a ridiculous number to even just like farm or pay out for. And again, they didn't use any like base materials to bring the regular game economy of commodities in. And that's just what I don't understand at all. It was all like, hey, you got to do at least 3 special events somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 times in
Yeah.
order to get these things that players want. And it's like, oh, by the way, we're also taking off those like low level gear, of I say low level gear, like the other gear, the components and stuff like that that might drive like God, if Wicklow had a rest or like a contract for NDB 30s right now,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was based on X amount of Terranite and X amount of or Y amount of like Vexilite and Z amount of like titanium, and then like a few, and I mean like a few, like 1 or 2 like rare materials like um, you know, 20 Famaline or whatever, just like gems or something like that. And it was something that I had to contract out to people, or I had the ability to contract out to people, even if without like a contract system. If I just asked people in lore, like that like to mine, be like, hey guys, I'll pay you X amount of money to go get these things for me because I do not want to do that stuff. Or if they wanted stuff, and they just need like 1 or 2 things. Maybe they just need 1 or 2 component boards out of the CZs. I'm down. Pay me a reasonable amount of money, and then I go do that stuff.
They probably knew that people were collecting tons of them, based on the fact that they're putting expiration timers on them now in the future. Like our org's got like a bazillion keys, so that's probably why they did that. If I had to guess.
And the only reason why they would do that is because people were using it because that was what they wanted to do. But then they also have no way of physically trading items. I can't go to a market and buy stuff from players somewhere. There's no centralized location. That would be my other thing: is have a player market. And
Yeah.
and here's a crazy thing: we have convention centers. The convention centers only exist for their events, and then they never use them, but they still have them in game.
That's a
So
really good fucking idea. I didn't even think about using the convention centers.
So
as, like, a
just
player
use
market. That would have been a good idea.
when I was younger, I would love to go. I love to go to swap meets and to flea markets, and so these are great places to where you can put in a flea market where you can get rare items from NPC vendors, and then you can have a place where you can like just a tablet where players would be able to put their own items for sale in a market, and then you can go to that location and then figure out what's in that market and purchase it, and then it gets
Somebody
transferred.
said it in chat again. I would pay somebody to go to that convention center for me if it existed in standalone too.
Yeah. And like use the the places you have. And now obviously that's something they'd have to develop, but player markets are common in every MMO. Every MMO has some sort of like player market you can buy stuff from. So utilizing those locations and even just making it so that it's every weekend for 2 days it's open. So that way you have people who can like come to on the weekend to show up because people only play on the weekends. So and it's rare enough so that you're driving players to go, make sure they have their materials there so that they can sell or buy or swap or whatever.
They did kind of demo that stuff at CitizenCon. I think I'm gonna like go out on a limb here and really speculate, but like I think the idea of a player market based on what they showed is really not that difficult for them to implement, in the sense that they have a terminals already where you can buy commodities from them. The inventory source for those commodities is some bin somewhere. The way they demoed it at CitizenCon was that you had to have a base and a local storage with the goods that you were selling and an inventory there, and that the kiosk would kind of pull from that. Maybe they just need to hurry up and get finished with base building so you can actually have that shop. Like that's what they demoed at CitizenCon, was the idea of having a base where you could make your wares that you've crafted and make them available there, and people could fly to you and buy them. Access a terminal somewhere and maybe buy them and pick them up locally. So that it's on the roadmap. They just need to kind of get it done.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I hate the idea though that base building is the blocker of that tech.
Yeah.
Like, why can't we just have something now?
Well, yeah.
We've got.
Here's a great example of this. Is I know how they'll do that based off of what they have now. You show up at someone's base, purchase something on a terminal, and then you go to a freight elevator that the player has built. You access the freight elevator, and it's automatically transferred to the freight elevator, and then you bring it out of the freight elevator and then transfer it into your ship. And there you go. Or a hangar, and you can pull if it's a ship, and it pulls it out of the hangar. They already have those techniques. We know that that's where they're going to do that. So why not just use that same idea for like with a player market terminal that you can go browse and buy and sell things, and then it gets automatically sent to their freight elevator at whatever location it's located at. So like, Orison or Orville. You could test out that material right now. You could do that with what they're building, rather than waiting for base building to come around. So like, I think that would work, and then that's a great example of immersion gameplay, because you could go to that bazaar and or to that swap meet or whatever, and you could also set it as that, hey, I want an ICTY, but I don't have the materials for it, so I'll buy the ICTY for X amount of money. So you could have somebody goes, oh, well, I have an ICTY and I could use the cash injection, or I'll swap you an ICTY for 10 Ace helmets that I have. Someone goes, well, I have an ICTY, I don't use it, but I could use those Ace helmets for this other thing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be just cash. It can just be an exchange of items. And if someone agrees to it, they just go to they accept it. They accept it. It comes into a contract. They put those items into a freight elevator. They send it down, and you give the options. As, would you like to use this for this contract? You say yes, and boom, you're done. And then players can it transfers the item to the other player's freight elevator, and it automatically transfers the items that were going to be swapped to your elevator, and you're done.
You know what we're talking about right now, Paul? We're literally just
player trading
around. Yeah, player trading and economy.
That's what I mean. Like, this is like, it's nice to have the ability to be able to purchase those items from other players using the MoTrader app, but it's clunky, and it can take it's awkward, and to get it to work right. They already want to do some of this stuff in their own design documents. Just do it. Just focus on that, and it would also get players to show up to the beautiful landing zones they've built. Yeah. And if you rotated the swap meet, the flea market location every week, so first month of the first weekend of the month, it's at Lorville. Second weekend, it's at Orison. Third weekend, it's at Area 18. Fourth weekend, it's at new Babbage, and then you just constantly repeat every so often, so you get people to move around.
That's such a good
How-
fucking idea. I wish they did that.
It's an idea I've
How
had
did-
for a while.
Yeah.
Well, how did Star Wars Galaxies do it? Like when you, as I recall, you crafted stuff almost like on a, not on a conveyor belt, but like you crafted quantities,
Yeah.
right? And then it put it in some kind of storage area so that somebody had to go to your point of sale and access your terminal, and it would access the local inventory somehow. So
Yeah.
like if you ran out, if you sold out of them, they'd be out of luck.
It was factories, but it was also the bazaar, if I remember correctly.
Factory. That's
Yeah.
it. Okay. Yeah. So what was the bazaar? I'm trying to remember. It was like 20 years ago, 25 years ago.
It's been a while, but if I remember correctly, it was you go to the bazaar to find the location. There was
Oh, that's right.
to find
They had
the
a
stuff to
they
sell.
had a central area where you could go to the terminal and search for all the stores.
Yeah.
You could buy it on the terminal, and then but when you wanted to go pick it up, you had to go physically go there and grab it.
I think so. But yeah, no, I think, and that's a great example of like that's player engagement and emerging
Yeah.
player behavior with player markets that CIG doesn't control, that players control, and would encourage players to interact with each other at least nominally. Because I can't tell you, I love ICTs. I would buy an ICT in a second if someone would sell it to me, but there's no way for me to like physically transfer ownership for it.
Yep.
And I probably have a bunch of stuff that someone who has an ICT would probably want in terms of like items and other things. So finding those a way of trading items rather than just cash would work, I think, for a lot of folks. So,
Yep.
anyway, any other things you all want to talk about in terms of specific any ideas that CIG could run with before we move on to the question and answer session?
For me, I think we covered a lot. Like we touched on the big things, like the one night Cobb brought up about the player contracts. I think is really huge. Touching on some of the mechanics that they already have in the pipeline and kind of seeing those through is really significant.
Your idea, I think, about like the territories is a good idea, like how
Yeah.
territories would actually work rather than just like vaguely.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for watching us. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's very clear that this huge universe they've crafted is very ripe for a lot of these ideas because there's so much potential in it. They just have to kind of hurry up and cross the finish line and get some of these mechanics out there so we can all take advantage of them.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these mechanics are closer than people realize, and I'm just hoping CIG actually.
Fuck, I hope you're right.
I just hope what I'm hoping for is that CIG is able to test some of these mechanics out that we know that are part of other things like crafting and base building before they can get full crafting and base building in. They can test them out with these other features. Also, by adding these features, they would allow for players to interact with them, even if they aren't crafters or if they're not base builders, they don't have their own base. That way, you could still experience the loop, and then you just have more depth with the crafting and base building. So, yeah. All right. With that being said, thank you for joining us. Thank you for Night Cobb and Radar Ranger. Make sure you can check out Night Cobb on Tirakel's YouTube as well as Tree 0311's YouTube, or you can hang out with him sometimes when he shows up on the League expeditions we do on Sundays. So he shows up every so often.
And I'll see you in the contested zones.
Yes, and the contested zones. Every time you're entering into contested zone, Night Cobb is right around the corner. He is the predator.
It was me.
And you are his prey.
Yeah. Right.
And then we've got Radar Ranger. Andy, go ahead and check out My Radar on all the app stores if you want to do that. And also you can find him here sometimes in other places. And also his organization, which is Enemy Contact.
Enemy Contact, I think. Yeah. Did we say? Yeah.
So
I like it.
And if you enjoyed this, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe for more content. And if you're watching this or listening to this on the podcast format, leave us a review and a comment. That actually does help boost the visibility in the algorithm, Spotify and the other audio podcast formats. So please do that. And if you like this, join us live, twitch.tv/theastropub, youtube.com/@the Captain's Table Podcast on Saturdays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Would love to have you join us and put your own questions in for our After Dark sessions. But for now, if you're watching this live, hold on. We're going to be moving. Take a few minutes break and move right into the question answers. If you're listening to the recorded version of this on YouTube, we'll kind of do a quick sign out, and the next video release will be the actual question and answer session in like the Wednesday. Thank you for watching, and like I say every time, hope to see you someday